You know, my relationship with my dad was he inspired me to do a lot of things. You know, I talk about my love of the outdoors. He would carry me on his back and do orienteering courses. I remember that. I remember going mountain bike riding with him and camping with him, father-son trips to the range. So like, I want to give that to my kids too.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Impetus Minds of the Driven. We are back in the wonderful Pale Horse Coffee headquarters location where they roast all of their coffee beans. These guys are an awesome sponsor of this show and of Forerunner Productions as a whole. If you like coffee of all the different types of blends, including my personal favorite, the Midnight Driver, their high caffeine blend, you want to go over to palehorsecoffee.com and get you some. You can get that for 15% off if you use our promo code Forerunner at checkout. Again, that is palehorsecoffee.com for all of your coffee needs and apparel. They have some really awesome branding. Make sure you check them out. Again, that's palehorsecoffee.com. Promo code Forerunner, just like Forerunner Productions at checkout, so that you can get 15% off of that order. I am joined today by a really special guest. There's been a lot of emphasis and focus around law enforcement in the past 2 years, and I am really pleased and honored to welcome Sean on here. Sean has been in law enforcement for a little over 12 years now. He has a wonderful story that I'm looking forward to tell. He has an extremely driven mindset, even going all the way back into being a part of the SWAT teams. He is now training to be a canine handler with the SWAT teams, and you know, if you've watched anything from The Shelter Hole or from Let's Talk Fortitude, which is my dad's show, that we love the doggos, and that Mike Ritland, who does some dog shelter stuff, has made a huge impact on his career and his journey. So it is a real pleasure to have you here on the show, man. There are certain things, we're keeping his last name out of it for a reason. We're keeping the departments that he works for out of it for a reason, guys, because we don't want this to come back on the enforcement thing. This is about his story. This is about his driven mindset and his experience. And hopefully, if you have a desire to serve on law enforcement, maybe he can give you a glimpse as to what it'll take and maybe be that impetus for you to change the direction of your life and go into something that you've always wanted to do. So, Sean, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start off with how it is that you made the decision that you wanted to get into law enforcement. We've talked about this a little bit offline. We've gone through it actually in quite a bit of detail, but I know that at one point, law enforcement wasn't even on the docket. It actually started with you wanting to be a history teacher, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. When I got out of high school at 18, I decided that I wanted to do, I loved history, and so I enrolled in the local community college, was working towards that history degree. But with the way the school systems have developed in recent years, I feel like they take away the power from the teacher. You know, they want their own agenda and different things like that. I saw the writing on the wall. Mm-hmm. And I also realized I've always been a hands-on person. I loved the outdoors growing up, you know, camping, everything from camping to paintball to hiking. If it was outdoors, I wanted to do it. I did lifeguard and Civil Air Patrol. But I realized, you know, man, I need to do something like the military or law enforcement. And your dad at one point wanted, or you were wanting to be a pararescueman, right? Yes. That was your first gig. Before the law enforcement thing, you wanted to do a pararescue guy. That's why I did Civil Air Patrol, because part of the reasons I wanted to prepare for that, I used to watch like the trauma ER shows, right. Not like the reality shows, not the ones that are, you know, like regular ER. So you could see the different medical procedures we were doing. I did Civil Air Patrol to help me prepare for that, because that helps as an auxiliary for the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And I even did lifeguarding on the swim team. You know, I went to states and districts for my high school team during the first 2 years I was in high school. And I did all those things. I'm like, what does it take to be a good pararescue driver? I got to swim. Yep. I got to know about medical stuff. I was taking first aid classes at 10 years old, because I could still attend as long as I had a parent with me. You know, my mom was very supportive of that. And, you know, Civil Air Patrol kind of gave you that military mindset and discipline and learning certain things so that prepared you for that. But, you know, I realized with having moved so much, I wanted to live where I wanted to live. And that might be a silly reason, but I realized law enforcement has a lot of aspects similar to the military, not exactly the same, But I realized, you know, that's better than sitting in office. It's not, you don't have to teach kids that don't want to learn, or a school that won't let you teach what you should want to teach, because they're teaching to the tests on the schools now, you know, or to whatever curriculum they want to do. And so I ended up going into law enforcement because I was like, you know what, and I was 20 at a time, so there was only a few agencies I could apply for. Not everyone will hire you before you turn 21,
right.
But I ended up getting into corrections.
And corrections is working with inmates at prisons and such, right? Correct?
Yes, I worked for a sheriff's office, so it was a local city jail.
Okay.
So there are different levels. You have your local, your state, and your federal. And there are like private entities that do corrections too. So this was still considered law enforcement as a sworn deputy, but I did corrections during that time. I did for 5 years.
So what was that like working in a local jail like that? Would
you have to have a thick skin is the best way to put it. The inmates, they purposely try to say things to get you angry. They try to say certain things to antagonize you or cause you problems. And you have to learn to have patience. You have to learn to not rise and lower yourself to their levels. You know, be safe, be respectful of people. You can be respectful of someone even if they're yelling and screaming and cursing you out. Right. But you need to not buy into that. You know, I think some people, they get so passionate, especially you see social media, someone says one thing and they want to throw a fit about it. It's not a big deal. It's words. Okay? So I did that for 5 years, and I think that helped me a lot when going into law enforcement later as far as patrol perspective, not being baited into things. Because some people, they just want to bait you. They want to get that, they want to have their cell phones out and get that moment. And they're purposely trying to antagonize, and having that thick skin and mindset of like, you know what, words can't hurt me.
Yeah,
I'm going to do my own thing.
That's something else I want to ask you, because you went from being in corrections to working the beat, right? So being out on patrol, in uniform. First of all, tell me about the transition from corrections into that. Was that a pretty quick type of thing that they did, or did you have to go through some more schooling?
No, it took about a year, actually. So I was always unique in the corrections to the fact that I was taking trauma classes for like learn how trauma management or tactical first aid. I was doing firearm courses outside the department. And really that started back in like 2010 when I went through the academy. You know, they always tell you, remember these skills, practice these skills, because you may never get this much training again. Right. You can't get the same thing with in-services. So I remember working my butt off to maintain my qual scores because I wanted to jump on the handgun. And I came back next year and I shot lower than I wanted to. And I was really upset. And an instructor came up behind me and was like, well, hey man, maybe it's not that you haven't been practicing, maybe it's how you're practicing. So I started getting into competitions, taking classes outside the department, and a lot of people were like, man, why don't you just become a patrol cop? That's more than what, we don't carry a gun in corrections. It's your hands, and if you're lucky, depending on the agency, maybe like OC spray is something like a less lethal alternative. Yeah. But so I started thinking, I was like, you know, man, maybe I would be happier, you know, doing corrections, because corrections gets boring. It's the same, you're on a schedule just like the inmates. You're in there with the inmates. Yep. So doing patrol gives you a lot more freedom where you can go out and you don't know what the day's gonna bring. But it actually took about a year because I had to go through another academy because it's a different certification for my state. And so I had to repeat an academy. I had to go through field training, be the new guy all over again. Yeah. Go through field training. Our department does training after the academy because we go to a regional academy. Okay. So I will say, as a corrections, it prepared me a lot of things. The firearms, the defensive tactics, the hand-to-hand stuff, the driving, a lot of that stuff is similar. So the big thing for me was learning different tactics and the legal. But thankfully that stuff from the sheriff's office and the extra steps I had taken with doing other firearms training, even medical classes outside the department and things I was enthusiastic about, helped make it easier. When I went through that academy, it was a lot easier than when I went through the corrections academy. Because that was all brand new to me the first time around. Yeah, sort of the exposure thing has helped you, like, one, learn the lingo, two, understand sort of the culture around it. Going from, you mentioned the thick skin aspect, and so now that I've got your story as to how you got from corrections to the beat, I want to know what it was like going from people trying to antagonize you and get a rise out of you without cell phones into a world where you're being antagonized and people are trying to get a rise out of you and there are cell phones, right? You know, it doesn't matter to me, because if you behave rightly, it doesn't matter if they film you with a cell phone. It doesn't bother me. I've said to you before, hey man, you can film me, but you gotta just stand over there so you're not getting in my way. I've told people that before, you know. people are right to their opinions. They want to film me. I'm a public servant working in a public environment.
Right.
You know, so that doesn't. I think just having that, because some people are like, oh man, they're going to plaster me all over social media. You know, I got body cam too.
Yeah. Right.
And you know, some cops are like, oh man, body cams are just, you know, they're going to be looking to get us things in trouble. Honestly, like body cams have saved me in so much stuff, because you get one story from somebody or a little bit of a 30-second
he said,
clip,
she said, yeah.
and then they play my body cam. I'm like, you know what? He acted completely right, and he was actually professional, and it's kept me out of more trouble than ever.
Yeah, my mommy used to have this phrase, said, locks keep honest men honest. And in a way, those cameras and things like that are verifiable locks, right? Making sure you're doing what you're supposed to do.
If you're not doing anything wrong, you should be fine. The only thing, you know, we talk about, even from a supervised perspective, the camera only shows one angle.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't catch everything. But it honestly has kept me out of trouble as far as being evidence that I didn't do any wrongdoing, you know. And it's been helped in court cases and whatnot, you know, proving that someone did something because it was caught in my body cam.
What was one of the hardest calls you've ever gotten called into?
There's a lot of different calls. You know, I think one time we had a situation with a mother that had children in the residence that had shot at her husband, and I have children of my own, and we ended up, she ended up coming out and surrendering. You know, so it was a peaceful end. But we had to clear the house, and as I'm going up the stairs, you know, a 2-year-old in diapers is coming out crying. You know, and when you have your own kids, sometimes that you still have to do the job. You know, I picked up that kid, I evacuated him out of the house, you know, while we finished clearing the house and everything. But it does affect you sometimes when you're like, man, this kid looks like my kid.
Yeah.
You know, I think those of us with children sometimes see that when we have to deal with children calls as well.
How easily it can be that, like, man, in a bad situation or a different timeline, that could have been my kiddo, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and training helps with when you're in those situations, you still execute what you need to do. But sometimes you have to sit down and be like, okay, let's go through this mentally, and you know that you helped that kid. You might be upset about the situation you ended up, but you helped make sure that kid was safe at the end of the day. You know.
Do you find yourself having to slip into like an element of sociopathology? And I mean that because there are several different levels of sociopathology, of like detachment. So there are people that are born with it, they just can't feel emotion. And then there are people that have trauma inflicted on them, and so they learn to detach from emotion, or they accidentally detach from emotion. And then there are people that, because of their jobs, lawyers are known for doing this, have to learn how to like flip a switch and sort of detach from the emotion. And it's a form of sociopathology, but it's not like being a sociopath, right? Like, so I don't want to confuse the audience with anything like that. But is there like that type of switch that you have to learn how to have, where you have to like, all right, I got to turn it off?
I think you do sometimes. I think sometimes, and you have to realize emotions are okay. It's sometimes you should have emotions about certain areas, but it's just being able to handle a situation professionally the right way, sometimes without getting emotion involved. And sometimes, you know, we talk about in training, sometimes if you see an officer getting upset, you know, hey, tag out. If there's another officer there, maybe let him take over and try talking to somebody. You know, and sometimes they can help the situation, but it gives you a moment to go, okay. But you have to be aware of those emotions. Otherwise, you don't know. And some people, they get up to here and they're not keeping track of their emotions. So I think it's less detaching, but being aware of your emotions and knowing how to control them, you know, appropriately, and know when I got to take a break.
And those tag outs, I was about to ask, and those tag out things, how much does like humility and pride play into that, right? Because they like, do you often have, I guess it's like, what type of like mental training do you guys go through to make sure that you're, you know, not being prideful and being like, yeah, no, I do need to tag out and go do something, right? Like,
I think that's hard because you're talking about an environment, and it's alpha.
Yeah.
You know, would be the best way to put it. You have a lot of alpha males and even females, you know, because the females do law enforcement too.
Right.
But so sometimes, you know, you do have to just have a moment of humility, or at least being aware of like, hey, I need help. I need help with something. Talk to another officer. You're feeling stressed about stuff, or that tag out situation. Like, hey, dude, you know, I just got involved in a bad fight with this guy. I need you a moment to take custody of her for a minute. Let me go take a breather. So, you know, to make sure I'm calming down. And they talk about that in our training too, from a mental health perspective too. You know, there's resources available to us, but it's also like they talk about like, hey, you're getting emotionally involved.
Yeah.
You may have to let someone that's more you know, that's either, if you just rolled up on a scene, your emotion level is going to be different than someone that's been just involved in a serious fight.
Right.
You know, So sometimes, you know, it's like, hey, take custody of this person for a minute. Let me calm down before I take this person to jail that I just had a bad fight with, you know, so that way you can, you know, make sure you still behave appropriately and respectful to that person, you know.
So before you moved from the beat to training to be a canine handler, you did a stint with the SWAT team. And before we talk about how before that, what that transition sort of looked like, I want to know, like, how did like working the beat help prepare you for what you would encounter on the SWAT team?
Well, so it's an auxiliary unit for us. So you still work the beat.
Yeah.
But you do 2 days of training a month. At least our team does. Some teams do it differently. Sometimes there's 1 day a month. Sometimes it's a lot more. There's some teams that are trained 4 times a month. And then there, of course, your teams that's all they do. And those are generally your larger department specialty agencies and stuff. All you do is SWAT stuff. That's all you're trained for, because they have a higher calls that require a SWAT team, you know, where it's safer to use them. But I think as far as working the beat, you know, taking firearms training seriously, being willing to practice on your own, being willing to do physical fitness on your own. There's a mindset among some officers of, well, I'm not going to do it if it's not issued to me and it's not given to me as part of training.
Right.
But that's almost irresponsible, in my opinion, for this kind of line. You need to be thinking about your physical well-being and making sure your skills are sharp so that you can perform to your best, you know, in uniform patrol. Because you can be put in life and death decision-making situations, threats to yourself. But having that good mindset to be prepared ahead of time. Because I saw some people that would try out for the SWAT team that it was obvious they didn't change anything about their lifestyle. And they come to you like, oh man, how can I get better? And you tell them and they don't do it. And practicing firearms, for example, because we have to shoot the qual twice and get a higher than normal score. Practicing that outside work shows motivation. You know, and that way you perform well when you try out. And same thing for the physical. We got to do a physical fitness test. You know, and you got to wear heavy gear and different other equipment on. You need to be in good shape. Otherwise, you're a liability to the team, and you may not pass that PT test. And there's some people that are just lazy about where they don't do anything. And then they go, oh, well, I failed, you know, it's unfair or whatever. It's like, dude, you didn't do anything to prepare.
It's not unfair. It's lack of preparation on your part.
Exactly. You know, some people just expect things to be handed to them, and sometimes you got to work for it. So I think that
drives me up a wall, because that's one of the things that inspired my book, and I'm actually going to take that as an opportunity to plug my book, is because my book is largely inspired by the participation trophy culture, and the fact that like everyone gets something handed to them at some point, and how people, rather than feeling when you're treated like that as a child, you expect adulthood to be like that too, right? That you're going to have things handed to you, just like some of these guys that you're talking about. And the reality is that life's not going to hand you anything. You have to go out and take it. You have to have a mindset that you are going to identify what it is that you are gifted with. You're going to use that gift, and whatever your goals are, you are going to go out and you're going to take that thing. And that's what I wrote about in this book. It's one of the, it's got everything from ways to fight depression and anxiety to motivational quotes from different people, ways to get good at those gifts that you have, figuring out a direction for your life, to figure out which direction you want to take it down. But it's also this really hard pushback on the idea that life is going to hand you something. That's why it's called You're Not Special, You're Gifted. You don't have to be handed something to have a gift, right? You're given that at birth by God, I believe, that this gift is going to allow you to solve a problem in this world, but you have to identify it and you have to take it upon yourself to do something with it. So if you want to know all of the cool things that I have in this book about my experiences in the military and the things that I've grown up learning from my family that have allowed me to identify my gifts and then apply them so that I can have conversations like this and help Sean give his gifts back to you guys in the same way that I'm trying to use my gifts of speaking and videography and storytelling to give back into you guys. You need to pick up a copy of my book. It's on Amazon, it's at Barnes & Noble, it's anywhere that you get your books online, all of that good stuff. If you want a free copy of my book, make sure that you go to 400productions.locals.com and become a supporter for $10 or more. I'll sign it to you, I'll send it to you, I'll even hand deliver it to you if you live close enough to me. Just like I did with Sean. Sean came to a book signing and got a copy of my book, man, and you've been enjoying it, but you didn't even get to finish it because your 10-year-old stepson grabbed it.
He stole it from me.
He stole it from you. He's been enjoying it.
He's reading through it and he's asking me. It's prompted a lot of good discussion.
That's
now.
awesome, man.
Well, I love having discussions with him about stuff. He's very intelligent about that. So.
I'm so happy that it's been able to like prompt those types of discussions. And so so again, if you want to have great discussions, if you want to learn how to use your gifts, if you want to know that you're not alone whenever the world and society and even your own mental state, who I call the coward that lives inside each one of us, tries to tell you that you're not good enough, that you can't use those gifts to impact society and give back into the world. We talk about how to fight back against all of those things because you do have a gift and you're especially equipped to solve a problem in this world. So if you want more from that, make sure you pick up a copy of my book. I want to get back into talking with you about your journey. How did you get selected for the SWAT team? Did you apply for the SWAT team? Like, what was that all about?
So you have to apply.
Okay.
And they look at certain things in your records to make sure that you don't have certain disqualifications. Like, you can't be getting in trouble all the time, you know. And then there's a PT test, and then there's a shoot the qual twice to make sure you're consistent. Some people, they can pull it off the first time, and then they fail the second time because they let that pressure get to them. Because you have to take a certain amount of pressure, you know, because you could be, like I said, thrust in stressful situations, and you got to be able to adapt to that and overcome that. And then there's a panel interview where they'll ask you certain scenario questions and ask about your background, your commitment to the team and whatnot before they make a final decision whether or not you'll be able to join the team.
Okay. And what type of, after you got accepted, what type of training did they put you through for that?
I was fortunate that I went straight to a SWAT school. So I did about a week and a half of training, physical training, learning the different types of room clearing that we do, firearms training, making sure that we're holding ourselves to a high caliber of standard. Because some people, they look at, I shoot hundreds on the qual or high 90s on the qual, whatever the percentage standard is. And they're like, I'm good enough. I don't need to do anything more. The qual is just a basic test of skill. Sometimes you have to look beyond the qual and try.
That should not be the standard for or that is the minimum standard for acceptance.
That's the minimum standard for acceptance.
Not the maximum expectation for what you should strive for.
You stop at 100. You know, sometimes you get to push beyond that 100.
Yep.
And sometimes that's going to require, you know, like I said, they pushed us in certain directions during that school, get beyond that 100, you could say. And sometimes you got to push yourself to get beyond that 100 and do more than what other people do. You know, like I said, there's certain mindset amongst officers of like, I passed, you know, and when you're making life and death decisions that could affect other people's lives, including your own and your fellow workers and even your family, because there's legal liability too, not just, you know, physical, you need to make sure that you're at the top of your game so you protect all that. Because that's ultimately what we're becoming. We're becoming a type of protector. Right. You know, a guardian, as some people call it, where we need to bring our A game to every call we go to, you know, because that's the duty that we have to the public and to our community. Yeah. You know, and sometimes departments can't afford or don't have the time to get you to the level that you really should be at. Right. You know.
So what took you from wanting to do the SWAT type of thing to being a canine? Right. Did you have to apply to be a
I had to apply for that as well.
Okay.
I will say I love dogs. I've always loved dogs. And this is like since I joined the department, because you have to have certain years on sometimes to apply for certain facilities. This is the first time they posted where I was eligible. Okay. And I love dogs. I love the outdoors. A lot of the dog stuff is outdoor best. Nice. I do the search and rescue team as well. So I'm out there trudging through the woods looking for people, and dogs are it's fun. It's like cheating. They help you out. They're enthusiastic to work too. To them, work is play. Right. Yeah. So, you know, they want to play, they want to please you, and it's a great relationship between you and the handler, and you got to put in a good effort too. You know, as far as, you know, learning your dog's behaviors, making sure you're training your dogs right, you know. And like I said, I'm still learning. Officially, I'm not a handler until I get certified. Yeah. You know. That's why I keep emphasizing that he is in training, folks. Yeah, it doesn't count until you're certified. Right. That's what one of my trainers has joked about. You know, but it's a brand new experience for me. I love it. Yeah, it's a wholly different aspect of uniform patrol. You're going out there and you're looking for bad guys. Yeah. You know, that's ultimately what you're trying to do. And you're also sometimes you're looking for that lost child that would be really hard to find, or the dementia patient or an elderly, and finding them and being able to reunite them with their families and make sure that they're safe is a rewarding process in itself. You know, I've learned that from the search and rescue side without the canine as well. You know. Man, that's awesome. So you also have a family. Like you've been raising a family.
We're not going to get into how many kids and everything you got because the list goes on and on and on. But at what point did you start beginning to build that family? And then what has it been like for you? I hate to throw two questions at you at once. I have a bad habit of doing that. But what has it been like to raise a family while also working as a law enforcement officer? Because I know that can be a little bit different experience because it's a different job. So,
it's very rewarding, honestly. Having kids, being able to pass down things to your kids, and you learn things from your kids too. Sometimes you learn that, because you want to be a good example for kids. Sometimes you go, you know what? I need to change something about myself to be a good influence on my kid, to make sure he's raised to be a better man than I was. My relationship with my dad he inspired me to do a lot of things. I talk about my love of the outdoors. He would carry me on his back and do orienteering courses. I remember that. I remember going mountain bike riding with him and camping with him, father-son trips to the range. So I want to give that to my kids too. Right. If one of my kids say, I want to become a cop, I want to discourage it. I'd be proud of them. They want to go in the military, I'd be proud of them. Because, it feels like I influence that, and they give you such beautiful memories and stuff, and see them do something for the first time successfully or guiding them as they try and reach their goals. I think that's very rewarding as a parent. And to have a wife that supports those goals, my wife is very supportive of my lifestyle. You have to have a supportive wife in law enforcement. She's a first responder as well. Okay. Just from the paramedic side.
Wow.
So having that relationship where she understands certain things I go through, I understand certain things she goes through, and we support each other through that and inspire it and pass that down to our kids is just a beautiful, rewarding process. I absolutely love it.
That's really awesome, man. Influencing the next generation has been one of the biggest things that we talk about doing as a company, because we're a story company. Our mission statement is to tell the best stories that have ever been told and to capture the soul of a society. I admittedly am gifted with save the world syndrome, which means I see problems and I want to fix all of them even though I know that I can't. And the way that I have sort of reconciled with that so that I don't send myself insane, or at least more insane than I already am, is realizing that there is nothing that I can do about the world that I have today. The world that I live in today was gifted to me and relinquished to me by the people that came before me. And there is nothing I can do to change it. What I can change is the world of my kids, the world of tomorrow. What I do, the stories I tell, the people I interview, every day that I have the opportunity to change tomorrow by sharing an important story or by getting a book into somebody's hands or something like that. And so, the emphasis on kiddos in your life and the way that you're using the things that you're doing as an inspiration to them is really awesome, and I commend you for doing that. I want to talk a little bit about schooling here, because we're going to start getting into some culture topics now, and there's there's a cultural divide right now around the topic of college, and you have a sort of a unique college experience. You went to college wanting to be a teacher, decided like you said, you saw the writing on the wall of them taking away the freedom of the teachers to be able to teach what the teachers find to be important, and so you decided to go a different path. When it comes to your kids, do you think that you're going to try and influence them to go to college, or are you going to wait for them to sort of figure it out on their own?
I think it all depends on the career that they want to choose. Okay. There's some people, they want to go straight in the military, and they'd rather do the enlisted stuff. And there's certain opportunities in enlisted get that the officers don't. It's a different experience. And I was talking with my oldest about, he was asking about U.S. Marshals and how to do that stuff. And I'm like, U.S. Marshals, they want a college degree or military experience. So you need to think about that. You want to prepare for that. You need to think about doing one of those two things, or both even. You can join the National Guard and get them to pay for your college degree and do both. And I think it just all depends on what your goal is. And you need to think about what your goals are and then set, what do I need to do to reach that goal? And if college is a part of that, you should consider college and do that, and sometimes it isn't.
How soon do you think that kids need to figure out what their goals are for careers and stuff like that?
Every kid's different. I didn't figure it out until 19 years old when I was closer to 20. I went through several different goals from 10 to there. 10 is, I would say about 7. It used to be I would think about the same career my dad did in the Army, and that's what I want to do. Classic, son following his father. But then it kind of morphed from there and morphed again and changed again, and eventually, I found my calling. So sometimes it's not instantaneous. There's some people that make huge career. I had a guy in my first academy who was like 58 years old and going to law enforcement for the first time. And he decided that was career, and he was a very good officer. And he's done very well in his career field. So sometimes you can't decide right away, but once you kind of decide this is going to be my goal, you need to establish a set of substandards you need to be working for to perfect that goal. Like I said, when I was looking at pararescue jumper, I was doing swim team, Civil Air Patrol, all this different stuff, and even that still helped me. Even though I didn't go that route, Civil Air Patrol has a search and rescue mission. That helped me when I got involved in search and rescue, and gave me certain disciplines that helped me when I had to be disciplined in certain topics as a law enforcement officer.
In a situation where, let's say your kid is about to turn 18, maybe they already are 18, about to turn 19, a similar situation to you, and they have no idea what they're doing with themselves. How do you approach that as a parent? Because that was the situation that I was in. To give you an idea here where this conversation's coming from.
No idea.
That's
think
the
it's
position I was in. I had no clue. I tried going to college for a year, didn't work out. I didn't know what I was doing with myself. I just knew I wasn't going to keep going into debt to try and just figure it out, right?
I would say, like my dad, for example, wanted me to go into computer programming and stuff, because that was a very good paying career at the time. But I'm like, I can't.
Still is.
I don't want to be sent in office and stuff, nothing against that, or anyone that does that. But, I think my dad, whatever goal I set for, if he believed in that goal, he was giving me advice and helping me no matter what I decided. He gave me advice for different things since I've been in law enforcement. Even though he was in the military background, there's certain things that change over. And I think sometimes you just have to, talk to your kids and guide them as best as you can. But sometimes they have to ultimately make that decision. And you can't make that decision for them, because there's some kids that do what their parents did because that's what I was told to do, and then they're unhappy. And they wish they had done certain things. And I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be passionate about what they do. As long as that's a right moral path, I should say.
Yeah, there's one thing if you're passionate about, degeneracy versus.
At a certain point, if they're making very poor decisions, you got to be willing to cut them off. Sometimes my parents wouldn't help me with certain things they disagree with, and that's them being a good parent.
Right.
I think some parents
there's a form of love.
Like they don't want to see their kids fail, and sometimes they're helping them with things that they shouldn't be helping them, supporting them when they shouldn't be supporting them. So there is a difference of support when you should be doing it as a parent, and then cutting it off. It's like your kid's crying for the Cheetos, and wants the Cheetos and throwing a fit. You want them to be happy, but you also realize that they've had already 2 bags. They don't need another bag. It's not healthy for them. They need to eat real food to be healthy and stuff. You got to cut them off.
That's one of
they're
the
having
things,
that tantrum.
Well, that's one of the things.
Sorry, I got to be stronger and take that emotional pain of you not being happy for a bit, because I'm making a decision for you that's better in the future.
Right. Absolutely, and that's one of the things that Jocko Willink talks about in his book, Ultimate Ownership, about how discipline equals freedom, right? Like the ability to tell yourself no to something, to say I want that, but I'm not going to do that, is actually the ultimate form of freedom, because now you have control over your own vices, right? You have control over your own wants, your own desires, which is a totally different level.
Because of what my parents did, the influence they gave, I had a clean record, wasn't in trouble for anything, so I could make the choices I wanted later on.
Right.
And also had certain building blocks they had given me to be successful in that. And that's the ultimate form of love and good parenting from them, being able to make sure I had those opportunities because of the influence they had given me. And there's some parents that, again, some parents can't give their kids everything, but sometimes just being able to be that guide there so they can achieve their ultimate goals is a good thing. And being able to say, no, that's a bad decision. I'm not going to help you with that.
If you want to go down that path, you're going down it alone, and I am not going to help you.
And I was a knucklehead in high school with my mother. I argued a lot. I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to be out all night, and certain things she kept me out of being influenced in bad decisions. And I didn't understand at the time because I knew everything. But then now, years later, I told my mom recently on the phone, it's like, I'm sorry I was a knucklehead, when I was in college and stuff, I'm sorry, in high school. But like, because of what you did, it helped me to be a better parent and be better and have opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I went out and made those poor decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in a culture today that seems to be increasingly polarized, right? There is one culture that's forming that seems to be directly influenced out of the major music and Hollywood industry that deals with, for lack of a better term, sexual degeneracy, right? With what we see like the VMAs and different things like that in what's happened in the modern hip hop movement, as well as some of the movies and things that are coming out of Hollywood that are being posted up on Netflix. And then you have another side of the culture that is wanting to push back in this, but doesn't have any institutional power. Like, they recognize that it's wrong. I want to hear from you. What do you think is sort of the source of the cultural divide that we see happening today? Now, I just named some things there, but like I found that it's a little bit different for everyone. So I want to get your perspective.
For me, I think it's polarization. Where it's like, this is how I know it. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to have a conversation with you about what's your perspectives. You don't have to agree with everything that somebody says, but you can sometimes reach a middle ground in certain things.
Or even
and it seems like now, if you're in the middle ground, you're attacked by both sides.
Yep.
For not taking a side. And I think sometimes you have to have those discussions. I think too, education. If you're going to comment on a topic, I try not to comment about things like we just talked about the canine stuff. I'm not going to go into all the training stuff because I'm still learning. I don't know everything about it. I'm brand new to it. I'm learning how to do it. I'm not certified until certified.
Yeah.
And I'm still not going to know everything. I'm going to be the new guy. I think being willing to say, like, not to comment on certain issues and not jump in without educating yourself, is what some people forget. You see politicians, policing, perfect example. You see politicians or activists that comment on certain things and they don't know what they're talking about. They've never been a police officer.
Right.
And then you send them, some departments have done great PR things where they educate the public. They have these people come to force on force training or different other things. And sometimes after that, they're like, wow, I didn't know you guys had to make that decision.
Yeah.
There's the Democrats, for example, not all of them are attacking law enforcement. But that's where we normally see it. But like there was a mayor in New York that just got elected as a former police officer.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I would hope that he would be able to make a better decision about the direction the NYPD should be taking because of those experiences versus someone that is making those major decisions that never had the background and is unwilling to educate themselves on those topics.
Or surround themselves with people that are educated, I think. So do you think that better education is the answer to some of the polarization and cultural divide? And if so, how do we decide what it is that we should be educating ourselves on in those respects?
I think it depends on the topic.
Okay.
Because every topic you may, like I said, when I was thinking about pararescue jumper, I looked at things of what to apply to that to educate myself for that. But I think sometimes you're going to have to seek out experts, and experts in the field. And sometimes you may have to, they talk about a second opinion with medical stuff sometimes, Sometimes you're not sure about what a doctor's saying. Maybe go see a second doctor. And his opinion may end up being the same.
Right.
But sometimes it's good to just be like, okay, what's your thought on this? Sometimes something I do, sometimes when I've been in critical situations, we talked about body cams earlier.
Yeah.
I watch my body cam.
Oh.
And I'll talk to other officers, have them watch the body cam. I'll talk to my supervisors about a situation. They may disagree with how I handle something. They may offer me perspective, so if I'm ever in that similar situation again, I can make a more informed decision.
It's kind of like watching game film.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But I think as a leader, sometimes you have to, if you're not expert on a certain topic, you don't necessarily have to become an expert, but you need to seek out different opinions to educate yourself if you're going to be expected to make a decision on that. That's what a good supervisor does or a good officer might do. They may look up, in a team environment, you look at special forces, for example, and we do this on the SWAT team. Sometimes I'm going to learn skill sets that I'm not going to be an expert in. Like I'll be taught certain basic skills that is really the mission of another member, but at least I know that so I can help support him in that.
Right.
And know what to do if I get placed in a situation I have to use that skill. Yeah,
Right.
and you have to do that as a supervisor of learning different things, or a politician, and learning different things that you're expected to make a decision on.
Yeah,
so you can make a good informed decision. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to know certain basic facets of it so you can make a proper decision.
Yeah. It's a form of situational awareness, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, man, I love this conversation, but we're getting ready to get into some lightning round questions here. So it's not exactly questions. I'm going to give you topics, and you're going to give me the quickest answer that you possibly can, right?
All right.
And then we're going to call it for this segment, and then we're going to see every one of you over on forerunnerproductions.locals.com. Again, forerunnerproductions.locals.com, where Sean and I are going to have. I'm going to tease his history buff side a little bit. We're going to get into some of our favorite things about history and just have a nice deep conversation on a topic, something like that. So if you want to hear us deep dive into some of the history topics that Sean really loves, and there's a lot of things that he's been learning in the law enforcement stuff about the Wild West in the 1950s and 60s, and like the New York PD stuff, and some fascinating things that he was telling me. If you want to educate yourself, just like he was saying, make sure you go over to forerunnerproductions.locals.com and jump on board with that. Also, like I said before, if you sign up for at least $10 a month, you will receive a free book from whatever it is that we have most recently published. So whether that's my book, whether it's a book we have coming out, whether it's a book that we just released that I don't know about yet because I'm behind on the times and this was recorded months ago, any of those things are all over on forerunnerproductions.locals.com. We will see you there. Lightning round. First thing that comes to your mind when I give you a topic.
All right.
Dog.
Bloodhounds. That's the type I have. Easy one.
Coffee.
Pale horse.
Okay.
Plug it.
Plug it. Books.
Oh, man, so many different topics. Books. I think learning. That's the first word I think of. I think books educate.
Knowledge.
Books.
Food.
Oh, man. Despite, everyone say donuts, but I love pizza. Everyone says donuts is a cop, but you get us pizzas, we love you. We really do,
Guns.
Guns. Responsibility.
Ooh, okay. Training.
Being responsible. That's guns and responsibility goes hand in hand. If you're going to carry a gun for a living, even if it's just for personal defense and not even in a duty role, be it military or law enforcement, you have to be responsible with that. You have a power to take somebody's life or seriously injure somebody. You need to make sure you're well trained so you make that perfect decision if that, God forbid, that time ever comes.
Awesome. Children.
Guardianship.
Guardianship.
Yeah, yep. You're guide and you're protecting them, but you're also guiding them that future.
Okay.
So.
Love.
My wife.
Good answer.
Bonus points for her.
That's a brownie point.
I'm not sleeping on the couch tonight, guys.
Story.
Story. I think of learning again. Sometimes, for example, my trainer I have for Canine, he's had experience since the 70s in canine handling. And sometimes he tells a story about his past, and you just pick up something, a point, that you just like, oh my God, I picked up something really important that's gonna help me. Sometimes listening to different stories and stuff gives us a different perspective and learn things and make ourselves better. I mean, before books, what do? They did stories.
They're telling stories, man. There's all stories. Stories are the core of a society, and we really hope that you guys have enjoyed this story, letting Sean tell his experiences and talk about the things that he finds important. Hopefully that gives you a perspective more into the minds of the cops that are walking the beat and making sure that they are looking out for your best interest, even though that sometimes they seem like the bad guy because they're the ones that are enforcing the things that are allowing us to exist together as society. Man, thank you for what you do. Thank you for taking care of those dogs that help keep us safe, right? They're service members too. And thank you for being here and having this conversation. I'm looking forward to this history conversation we're about to have.
Okay.
Again, if you want the history part of this conversation, you have to head over to 4runnerproductions.locals.com. Until then, I'm Chad Garrett. That is Sean, last name unknown. And this has been Impetus Minds of the Driven. Sean, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.